got a few people on. Today we're going to talk about escalation clauses in our market today. It's pretty necessary sometimes to put those in depending on your price point. How many of you have worked with escalation clauses before? Anyone? I know JT has. Larry?
I don't even know what one is.
Okay, well, that's a good place to start then. An escalation clause is a clause that you would place in the contract that allows the price to increase up to a set ceiling based on how much the seller will net. Okay, and your buyer would set those ceilings at the time of contract, and then there's not going to be any miscommunication of where it goes from there. So I've in the chat box, I put an example of an escalation clause that I use quite frequently, and you're welcome to take a look at it. It reads, and this will go on page 8 of the contract. It says, buyer is incorporating an escalation clause as part of this offer. If the seller receives a higher priced competing offer that nets more to the seller while reviewing/negotiating this offer, the buyer agrees to increase the purchase price by, and you can put whatever amount you want in there, net over the above competing offer, not to exceed a total purchase price of X, period. If the seller exercises this escalation clause, seller agrees to provide buyer with a copy of the competing offer that initiated this escalation clause. And what that does is it does put some protection on the buyer. The seller does have to produce an offer that shows that they net more. Now the fear in when you use an escalation clause is then the seller knows your maximum right off the bat. So they could technically not counter anybody else, counter you back at your top price. You could, of course, have your buyer could agree not to accept that, but they know your bottom line at that point. And so you need to be cautious. Don't use this without thinking through all the scenarios that are available to you. Any questions so far on just the basic escalation clause and the parts to it? Yes, Robin.
Can you put that in the chat so that I could get all that language?
It is in the chat.
I
don't
see it.
You can't see it?
No.
I put it in there. Huh?
Did you go to just one person or to everyone?
No, it's to everyone.
Yeah, it didn't come up.
I can see it.
If anybody came on after you put it in there, we won't see it. We come into an empty chat box.
All right, I'll post it again.
And Lisa, while you're doing that, I would say that your introductory remarks were an excellent summation along with the verbiage that could be utilized when using an escalation clause. You know, at first blush, it's a very simple document, but there are nuances that everybody should be aware of. There are pros and cons, and that's why way back when I was a DB, I was hesitant to encourage agents to do that unless they really knew what the downside and what the upside would be, not only for their buyer, if they were a buyer's agent, but for the sellers, because there were a number of sellers, as I recall, that were adamantly opposed to seeing an escalation clause in their contract submission. So be mindful of that. And again, this is just really an enlightenment. And Lisa, you're right on top of things, and it's nice to see and nice to hear.
Well, I learned a lot from you over the years, so I'll give you some credit for that. One of the things to be cautious of also is your audience. The listing agent may or may not be informed on how an escalation clause works. They may also not know how to do a cost sheet for their seller. So what I would always encourage you to do when you provide an offer with an escalation clause is that and I do this with every offer anyway, provide a net sheet for the seller based on your offered parameters. And that way, at least they know what your net is. In a second, we're going to go through a couple of scenarios and how good are you guys with cost sheets? You all should be really good with them. I mean, at least with basic scenarios. Okay, so we're going to go through 4 different scenarios, and just off the top of your head, I want you to try to figure out which one would net more to the seller on first blush, okay? No one's being graded, so don't freak out. We'll go through these afterwards. Okay, so offer number 1. This is a house that there's a list price of $250,000, so it's a moderately priced home, and that would be the one that you would probably see an escalation clause on in this market. You probably will not see one above in the 450s or above in our marketplace. So the list price was $250. This particular buyer wanted to come in at $250 with $1,000 earnest money. It's going to be an FHA loan with 3.5% down. They're asking for 3% concessions from the seller. The total commission is 6%. Don't forget, you'll need that for your cost sheet for the seller. There will be a home warranty paid by the seller of $500. The closing date will be July 15th, and I'll give you the tax proration so you don't have to figure that out. The tax proration will be about $1,349.32. And then there's an HOA transfer fee of $300. So do you want to go through those numbers? Anybody have a guesstimate at this point, or are you still working through it?
A guesstimate as to what?
As to the net to the seller.
Oh, it's a guesstimate to net. Okay.
Sorry, it wasn't clear. Some of that is extraneous information that you don't need for the seller net. Okay, so I threw some stuff in there that you don't really like. The earnest money amount is irrelevant. The down payment amount is irrelevant for the net to the seller. But those are things you're going to need when you're figuring out a cost sheet for your buyer, so you might as well have that information. So in this situation, with this one, a $250 purchase price with an FHA loan, 3% concessions, which is $7,500, in case you're math challenged. 6% commission, $500 home warranty, and an HO fee of $300. The net to the seller would be $223, $295.68. Okay. And we can work through all the numbers if you want. I'm just going to give you a couple of scenarios. So on the top of your head, that would be your offer. Okay. So they have a competing offer that came in. It also came in at full price. It came in at $5,000 with a conventional loan with $5,000 earnest money, with a 5% down payment, a 6% total commission. They're asking for $5,000 in concessions plus the appraisal cost of $600. They're asking for a home warranty of $600. And of course, the HOA transfer fee would still be $300. Anybody think that's a higher or lower net than the other one?
It's a higher net.
Very good. Absolutely. It's a higher net by about $2,500. The net on this one is $225, $123.68. So that would be one of your competitors. And we'll talk about how you should structure your offer in a minute. So here's competitor number 3. This one also came in at full price, $250,000. They're putting down $50,000. They want it to be a strong offer. So it's a $50,000 earnest money. It's a conventional, but they have a low FICO. So their interest rate is going to be 5%. And there's no concessions. They're not asking for any concessions. In this, they do have, there's a 6% commission, but their buyer broker asked for a $279 additional brokerage fee, and they're asking the seller to pay that. So the commission would be 6% plus $279. There's no warranty, no home warranty asked for. And then there's a $300 HOA fee. What do you think this one? Think stronger or less strong?
Well, then the offer is far stronger for the buyer, for the seller.
Well, maybe not if the FICO is low enough.
Right.
Correct. There's your catch right there. Is if this is a marginal buyer, no matter how great it looks on paper, it may not close. In this market, do you want to take a chance on that? We don't make those decisions, of course. The seller makes those decisions, but we need to present all that information to the buyer. And that's why it's so critical to have your pre-qual form with your contract. There may be something on there that is a red flag to you. You might also want to reach out to their lender before you present these to your seller and see how strong those people are. Just because they have a low FICO doesn't mean they won't close. They could have had a job change. They could have had some medical bills. I mean, there's various reasons that could happen that are legitimate. Or they could just have a lot of debt. You never know, but they pay their bills. So it doesn't necessarily mean it won't close, but it is something to be aware of. Okay, but that one does have the strongest net to seller at 231,094.68 so far. So now we have scenario 4. This is a cash buyer. They want this house, so they came in at 255. They're asking for no concessions, no warranty. They did notice the roof was a little on the older side, and they want the roof replaced, and they put it in the contract. The roof repair replacement would be $10,500. There's an HOA transfer fee of $300. Again, a 6% commission, plus this buyer broker asks for a $450 brokerage commission that they're asking the seller to pay for. What do you think? Strong or weak?
Yeah, kind of in the middle.
Yeah. What do you think the net's going to be? Higher or lower than that last one?
Lower.
Yep. It's lower by about $5,000.
Because of the roof.
This one comes in at 225, 214. So even though the price was higher, you got to look at all of the things that they're asked for in the contract. In this case, they weren't asking for concessions, but I mean, a roof is a concession. So make sure that you address that, and that does come out of the seller's pocket. So if you were writing an offer, obviously you would not know what the other people are writing, but you've looked at the house, you know it's probably going to need a roof. You know that otherwise it's pretty average. There may be some binger work that needs to be done, but anything that you see, you need to address in the contract. Don't forget, the binger is for undiscoverable latent items that are not readily apparent when you're making your offer. So if you know the roof needs to be replaced, you address that in your offer. If you see something else, then address it in your offer or adjust your price. So if you were coming in with an offer of $250, our original offer number 1, and you wanted to write an escalation clause in there, the buyer, you talk to your buyer, what do you think your buyer would maximum? Just throw me some numbers. What do you think your buyer would maximum want to pay for the house that probably is worth $250? Anyone? Okay, Anthony. Are you just waving at me?
I'm waving at everybody.
Yeah. All right, well, since no one's going to talk, they want to increase the offer by a net of $3,000. That's all they want to pay above and beyond this price. So what would that raise their maximum sales price or purchase price would then be? It'd be a little higher than the $3,000, don't forget, because you got to adjust for commissions and things like that. So they're willing to go up to $255 to match that $255 offer. But based on that, they would still, the seller would net more with theirs than it would on that cash offer on the $255. But I do believe the number 3 offer, with the low FICO, would still win if they didn't have an escalation clause. Don't you think? We need to do the math. Who wants to do the math? Nobody? Come on, guys.
Come on, guys, you can do it.
Someone do the math. Do you want me to pull up a cost sheet? Let me see if I can. Whoops.
And
I don't know if I can
Lisa,
show-
while you're doing that, I think it's also important for everyone to keep in mind that no matter what we do, no matter what the scenario, it's still going to be subject to an appraisal.
Right. Yeah, that's what's so critical nowadays.
Yeah,
We've had so many conversations with a lot of the people on this call about that. And, you know, it makes a big difference. Okay, so we're going to go in with our scenario 1. We're going to raise the price to $255. We're still coming in. It's still going to be down payment of 3.5. I could type. You want me to share my screen? Would that help you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, I can't. My host has disabled screen sharing. Okay.
Well, if the host is sitting there, just ask them.
Yeah. I just made you host, so you can try sharing it.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Let's see.
Bingo.
Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So this is your basic cost sheet form from Title Security, our preferred partner along with Catalina Title. Of course, you can use anybody you want or your client wants. So in this situation, we're going to raise the price to $255. The buyer has a 3.5% down payment, and they're going to close on 7/15, same as before. Property taxes we guesstimated at $2,500 based on what was on the listing. The commission was 6%. In this situation, there is no additional fat brokerage fee that we're asking the seller to pay. This is going to be a 30-year loan at 3.5%. And so this one was FHA. We're just going to generate the cost for the seller because at this point, we need to just figure out what we're going to net the seller. Okay. Can you all see that still?
Yep.
Okay. So we don't have to worry about down payment. The escrow fees are going to stay the same. They're going to maybe go up a tiny bit, couple bucks based on that increase of $5,000. The title policy will go up a tiny bit based on the $5,000 increase. In this situation, we've asked for them to pay seller paid concessions of what did we ask for in that one? We asked for 3% of concessions, which is $7,500. No, it's more now. What is 5% of?
3% of the 255.
Yeah.
7650.
What was it?
7,650.
7,650?
Yep.
Okay. We also asked for a home warranty. On this one was $500. The HOA transfer fee was $300. And what am I missing? Anything?
Somebody's got an open mic.
I know, I hear that too. Okay, so now they would net $227,826, which is still less than our moderately income challenged buyer that came in at $231. So even in this situation with an escalation clause, you still wouldn't have won.
Can I share page 2?
Yeah,
You have to make him.
I'm going to stop my sharing right now, and then you can share, I think. I'll probably have to make you,
Who has to give me the authority? Authority.
I'm never going to give you
Respect my authority.
I don't know how to make you a host. Let's see. Okay, I need help. Caitlin.
Okay, so if you go to participants and
Yeah.
you click on Anthony, you should have the ability to say make host.
While she's doing that, I want to share this. This was why I was late, because I was doing this because I have a offer. I have multiple offers on one of my listings, and I created this.
Yeah.
And basically it shows all the terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I did that as well. I think that's fantastic. Would you be willing to share your form with everybody?
Yeah, I Googled it and found it, but yeah, I'll definitely share this. And then like this one right here is an escalation clause. The first one, their escalation clause is up to 235, but for $1,000 more than the other offer. So what I did is I just worked backwards and figured that at 237 with their seller concessions, they're going to come out to a little over $1,000 more.
Great.
So I just did this, and then after I do this is when I do the cost sheet.
Yeah.
This gives them I guess you could say a macro look, and
Right.
the cost sheet could give them a micro look.
Exactly. And don't forget, the seller's not obligated to take any of these offers. They can still counter one or all.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is what I'm going to probably talk to my client about this one, is I talked to the lender, and they asked for 3%, and that's why I even thought about this right now, is because $7,000 seems like a lot to be asking for concessions. So I would call whoever's transaction that is. I would call the lender and be like, hey, what are we really going to be using concessions? Because $7,000 sounds like a lot.
Well, the ones I love, when you get one with asking for concessions, you look at the prequal and they're not required.
Yeah.
So yeah, I consider that money negotiable.
Yeah, me too.
Point.
So I'm going to probably counter this one and probably lower the concessions a little bit, and see if they're willing to just take this one right here as we counter that one.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then we'll probably do a multiple counter.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's all I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a really great worksheet. And I think that that's what I do too. I do a spreadsheet. Otherwise, it's very difficult to keep everything organized and in that situation. Okay.
How do I take it off of sharing?
You have to go down to participants and click it back to her as the host. You're going to make Lisa the host again.
He's not going to do it.
And this whole comparison thing is part of command. You know, you place your offers into command, and it'll do this spreadsheet thing, kind of similar, but
yeah, as long as you just really pay attention.
It's still in the works.
Yes, when you're very detail oriented, and I know that you would make sure that everything's in there properly.
Somebody's got a whole lot of background noise.
Yeah. Maybe we can ask everybody to mute if they're not speaking.
Just you have a switch.
Mute them.
You can mute everybody.
Yeah, just mute everybody.
Am I still sharing?
You are still sharing.
Yeah, your screen's still up.
You're the host. I don't know what I did then.
Okay. Let's see. I'm the host again?
Yeah, you're back on host. I made you host. I thought that would just fix it.
No, you're going to need to stop sharing your screen. Can you do that?
No. Oh, yeah, right there. Okay.
Perfect. We're all learning. It's all good. Okay, so I know some of you have questions. Don't be afraid to ask. This is a open forum. We all come from a place of caring. We've all been there. So if you have questions or concerns or don't understand something we've done, please ask us now. We'll walk through it with you.
Lisa, I have a general question.
Yes, sir.
Are many of the offers that you're seeing including concessions? In other words, are those buyer offers predominantly all asking for seller concessions?
Yes, whether they need them or not. And that's where it's different from 10 or 15 years ago when we were writing a lot of offers in this price point when nobody asked for them. Now it's considered commonplace to ask for concessions. It's almost odd to get one without it.
That's interesting to note.
Yeah, and that's what agents have been taught since, basically since the last recession, is to stick these in there. And it doesn't always do their client a service to do that.
And on top of that, it makes the buyer's offer a lot stronger if it's not included.
Yes.
So that's the balancing, and that's the reason for the question, because you have to somehow measure those concessions against a good offer, and you only determine that by preparing the net to the seller.
Exactly. And I've actually won offers with a lower purchase price with no concessions. The net is about the same, but I can also then go to them with confidence and say, yes, but we'll probably appraise for this. If you take the higher priced one, you're going to renegotiate an appraisal. You're going to knock more money off. So take mine now.
That's exactly right.
And just go with it. So I think that, you know, that's where as a buyer's agent, you need to look at, are you really serving your buyer by asking for more than you need? And as a listing agent, look at the net. Don't look at all the little things that are in there. It's all based on the net. And of course, closing date too. But in this situation, we're looking at the net.
Lisa,
Yes, ma'am.
you had that wording to type into section 8, but there's an extra piece of paperwork too, right? Isn't there an extra form that you fill out that you submit, or you just type it all in section 8?
You can type it on section 8 and then it's all clean. And you could do it in an addendum, but I wouldn't. Again, I'm all for less is more, you know, less wordage, less addenda, less, obviously anything that's required you put in there, but you don't need to be wordy. You don't need to add all this extra paperwork to a contract. If you can do it in 2 lines, do it in 2 lines. Don't add, you know, 14 more lines to it. So in this situation, I think that just page 8 is fine. As long as you're clear, make sure it's on the net amount and make sure that you have a maximum.
Yeah, so I want to jump in on this because one time I used the escalation clause. What the party on the other side did was immediately jump to, well, just you know, we'll just take your highest offer because you exposed, you'll go up to X number. Mm-hmm. They came back and just we'll accept your offer at that number. And I'm like, where's the other contract?
Yeah, show
me the proof. Well, no, you know, we'll just accept that. So if you counter at that, we'll just accept it. And they were trying to get us to roll over on the higher number.
Yeah. And again, I would never counter without them responding in some fashion. So if they want you to take that or ask you to counter at that or something, tell them to respond to you with a counter offer that your buyer could accept. Because, and again, please stop negotiating verbally on these things. If it's not in writing, it doesn't count. Obviously, sometimes a conversation helps, but one of the major calls, and I know JT can second this, is, well, we agreed upon it and then nobody performed. Well, we don't have a contract. We don't have a contract. We don't even have a meeting of the minds at that point because it isn't executed. So be very cautious about negotiating too much verbally. If they aren't willing to put it on paper, they're probably not going to sign it anyway.
Good point.
And Larry, that the other very valid point that you make is that in many instances, the buyer shows his or her hand with what they're willing to pay, which opens the door to a seller. Well, if I know that that's how much you want to offer, then let's go for that because you.
Right, it's exactly what happened. Yeah, it's exactly what happened. And I was like, wait a minute, we're skipping a step here. You know.
This is precisely why it's so important to have these kinds of discussions just before you get into that, because there are nuances here that we really don't know about and can't anticipate.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
Lisa,
people are always looking
question.
from their perspective. You need to look at both sides. So.
I noticed you guys said it must be in writing like all the time. So would a text message be considered to be in writing?
No.
No.
No? Okay.
No. And
So
don't forget, you're not
much-
a party yet to the contract, just the buyer and the seller. And so they're the ones that need to sign. I had things from agents that say, well, I've agreed to this. I said, well, you can't agree to this unless you're purchasing the property. The buyer and the seller. And let me put it this way, the legal buyer and seller. That's another conversation that has come up lately.
Okay.
Make sure you know who your parties are.
And Lisa, to add to that, Jeff Bryce said, hey, the less texting you can do, the better off you are. If you want to do it and it involves representation of your client, put it in an email so you can have an acknowledgement of one kind or another.
Exactly. And that's one thing I always have been preaching, and I know they get tired of hearing it, is if you have a verbal conversation, followed with an email that says, per our conversation on such and such date, we agreed to this. If you understand anything differently, please respond. And then you have a paper trail. But it's still not binding at that point unless buyer and seller sign something. Wendy, do you have anything to add? You look like you're falling asleep. I'm going to call you out.
No, nothing to add. I am seeing a lot of escalation clauses when I'm reviewing, seeing a lot of them. And because you put it in an escalation clause doesn't mean that you're not the only offer with an escalation clause.
Correct.
You sometimes get competing escalation clauses. And if that happens to you on the sell side and it kind of like is way too much, then come in and see us and we sit down and kind of parse it all out, because that can get really confusing when there's multiple escalation offers on a seller, for a seller to look at.
Exactly. And anything, if you get one and you don't understand it, or even have questions about how the numbers are working, reach out to one of your management staff, or even a seasoned agent, because you can get them in trouble if you explain it incorrectly. That's the worst feeling in the world, when you then have to eat crow later and explain that that wasn't what they were going to net, that you made a mistake. So just make sure that those numbers work out, and make sure that there is a cap on that for an escalation clause. Otherwise, if you don't put that ceiling in there, there is no limit. I've seen that. I have seen them leave it with the blanks in there, and it's open season then.
Yeah, and in this market, we have to constantly be aware of the appraisal limit. We can't predict that, but it's still such a throwing the dart with a blindfold on, trying to hit the bullseye, because I had a $270,000 deal. The house made total sense to me at that price, total sense to the listing agent. The appraiser came in $25,000 below on a $270,000 home.
Yeah.
And when the listing agent challenged him, because she's like, you didn't even go inside this house you're using as a comp. You even say in your notes, it was just, I looked at pictures or something like that. And he's like, nope, that's my appraisal. And so fortunately the seller came down 10 grand, but we had to figure out 15 grand.
Right. Or you don't. Make sure you use that 5-day window to let your buyer.
Oh yeah. It was something, my buyer said, hey, we'll go. They were okay with it. They realized the situation because I took the time to explain it to them.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the perfect house, et cetera, et cetera. The seller came down, so they were okay going up. It was they had the money to do so. So they made it work. But yeah, that was shocking that a $270,000 home was going to be. I could see 10, maybe 10, 5 grand, 10 grand, but 25,000 was like, how is it that far out of whack?
Especially when the buyer and the seller agree on a price. I think that's where I have the most problem with it. And in spending that price point too, we're not talking $2 million. We're talking $270,000, $25,000, or even, that's a huge variance.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if I can just add, it's not buyer and seller, but on a recent refi, personally on one of my properties, the appraisal came in $175,000 under bank.
When you said that in our meeting, I was stunned the other day.
It is shocking. And it was all due to the algorithms, the drive-bys, the desktops, and they don't get into the house. The appraisers don't check with the owners. They don't have all the amenities that are listed. And I'm telling you, it's problematic. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to enter the equation just as important as knowing and how to write a good addendum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and don't write a contract going and saying, well, we'll renegotiate when the appraisal comes in because we know it's not going to appraise.
You can't.
I heard someone saying that in the office the other day, and I wanted to go and throttle them. It's like, that's not representing your client. There's no guarantee that anybody's going to renegotiate. And what if it comes in? What if it does appraise? Then you just bought that house for that price. So don't use that. Obviously renegotiate if you have to at the end, but don't assume that's going to happen.
Yeah, because that's a conversation with your client. There's a possibility in this market. That's almost just got to be a standard conversation.
Yeah.
We're seeing varying appraisals. So if it doesn't come in and there's a margin of $3,000, do you want to cover that? Are you good with that? If it's $10,000, then we talk about either walking away or figuring out if we want to go that far.
Right. Exactly.
Make them aware of the fact that that the appraisals have been a little off in some situations, and there's a possibility of X, Y, and Z through that process.
Yeah.
Why is that happening all of a sudden? Because for so long they were coming in, relatively high. Are they just trying to get back to a medium, or why are the appraisals not coming in right?
I think somebody said it best the other day. The appraisers are not valuing up as aggressively as some of these people who are willing to buy at higher and or above list price are willing to go. The inventory is so tight here, but you get an appraiser out of Phoenix that doesn't know this market that well. Their Phoenix market is different from ours down here right now.
And
You get that somebody out of Phoenix assigned to come down here, you're likely in trouble.
Well, you can challenge that too.
Yeah, and I would also add that COVID has had an indirect impact too, where they don't get into the properties and they don't see them. And if you're driving by and one house has got 15-inch clay mined brick adobe and a house next to it is a new build and it's framed stucco and the square footage is less and the price is higher, there are some very definite inconsistencies that you have to deal with. So COVID has had its influence.
Yeah, absolutely has.
That's a good question. Last listing I had, the appraiser, so I usually change the lockbox and then change in the MLS. That way I can meet the appraiser out there. That time I wasn't able to, the appraiser wouldn't go out if I was there to meet him. He told me if you could put the lockbox back on, I'll go out there. If you're not willing to do that, then I won't go out there, basically. Basically, he was trying to do the whole social distancing thing.
Okay.
So what I went ahead and did, if I remember correctly, or actually, no, I didn't do this. This is an idea I just came up with. Leaving the comps and multiple offers or any type of list of upgrades on the kitchen counter, because if they're obviously going to sign in, they're going to see the kitchen counter and they're going to not sign in. If they're going to be able to go through your lockbox, you'll know that they'll have that information. Whether they use it or not is up to them.
Right.
But at first I was thrown away, and then I just thought about it maybe a week or so after that's probably what I should have done.
I always put together a packet for the appraiser. You can do it very diplomatically and where you're not trying to influence them. You can just say, I put this together based on my knowledge of the home. Please use it if you choose to. If you choose to not use it, it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, the bottom line is if you leave something for them, they'll at least look at it.
They're gonna look at it.
They're gonna look at it. My last listing that I sold, I had a list of 25 things about the house to know, things to know. I had the appraisal that was done on the house just 9 or 10 months earlier. Granted, it was not valid anymore after 6 months, but still the point is it came in at this number just 9 months ago, and the market has gone further up since then. And I also left CMA of stuff that had sold recently. So I just left a cover letter stating, my sellers had taken out a refinance loan. That's where this appraisal came from to do the renovation here. They did the renovation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, explained that whole thing. And, came in on number. So I don't know if that was an influence or not. I'll never know, but at least I made the attempt and knowing I worked for my client.
Yeah, it didn't hurt. And you were working for your client. Tess, you have a question?
I do. I'm sort of stuck back on the whole appraisal legitimacy thing because I come from the engineering background. So when regulations haven't caught up to culture, like a family of 4 going from using 300 gallons of water a day to now 50 gallons of water a day because toilets have changed and faucets have changed, whatever. We go back to the agency and say, your regulations need to catch up. So how can we justify standing behind a buyer or seller, whatever, when it comes in $25,000 on a $175,000 home? Or in the case of JT saying one was $125,000 discrepancy because of cultural influences and whatever, they're technically not doing their job. How can they not be held accountable to that?
Well, one of the things is it's a different licensing community than ours. So we cannot influence that directly. We've got to be very, very cautious as I think JT knows this, that, yeah, you can't talk disparagingly, you cannot confront them. I mean, there's a lot of regulations in place for that. Does it need to be looked at? Yeah, it does. There's a lot of appraisers that shouldn't be in the business, but there's a lot of realtors that shouldn't be in the business either. So we need to take a look in our own home before we look out to theirs. But yeah, there's some problems.
But
And
I was
Lisa, I would
hearing
just-
that it was compromised, that seller was forced to come down that 25.
They aren't forced. They don't have to accept.
They don't have
to sell for that.
Yeah, and I would submit, remember that appraiser and who the appraiser is doing the appraisal for. They're not doing it for the buyer or the seller, they're doing it for the investor. And
Right.
so that's what pretty much mitigates their decision-making. And of course, the only thing they have to look to is the marketplace. It's just that they may not be picking or selecting the right comps. And that's where you can be of great assistance to them. But with a drive-by or a desktop, and if they don't respond to any information that you provide to them, you're still at their mercy.
Mm-hmm. Right. But the seller never has to accept that. The seller, if the appraisal comes in low and the seller does not agree to lower their price, the deal will cancel. The buyer has the right to cancel or come up to the price with cash.
So I understood when I was going through the school and everything that, there's an accountability to our profession. If somebody doesn't feel agents are doing things properly, it can go up to ADRE and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Is there not an accountability complaint thing for appraisals, for appraisers?
Touchy, to say it nicely. I have tried to help an agent file a complaint against an appraiser, and it backfired on us big time. They then filed a complaint with ADRE stating that we were, outside of our area of expertise and infringing upon their rights to do all kinds of stuff, which we weren't doing. But your best course of action is kind of what JT said. If you use a lender that you like to work with, and they're regularly hiring an appraisal firm that is not coming in at a price that is market, then the market, I can't say exactly at full price or whatever, then you talk to your lender and say, you know what, we're having difficulty with this person. Are you sure you want to engage them as your appraiser? They pick them, we don't.
It almost sounds, at this point, it almost sounds like the ADRE at the state level should be talking with the department that oversees the appraisers and
That's
say,
what I'm
look,
asking.
something's got to give here. I mean, not
Yeah.
100% change, but can we take a look at this and talk a little more about it and see if there's something that each side can help the other side and massage this forward a little bit,
Let's not get hung up too much on that. Remember, my instance was a refi, and with the buyer and seller, it's going to be a lot different. So all you have to do is your homework, make sure you're prepared, and make every effort to share that information with the appraiser.
Good point.
It's a long battle to try to compete with them or to even minimize them. But the lenders can do that because they have a platform where if they have a succession of poor appraisals, then they have access to the appraisal board to somehow complain about that. So there is some accountability, but it doesn't fall within the realm of what we can do.
Correct.
It's not ours to worry about.
No, and also price your properties appropriately. Obviously, in this situation as a refi, that's not something you could have any control over. But I am seeing listings that are grossly overpriced right now because of the market. Just because you slap a price tag on it doesn't mean it's worth that. So be cautious about that. Make sure that that you're pricing appropriately.
If I may add, I can't remember in the last few weeks seeing a deal that canceled because of an appraisal come past me. So I think what happens with bad appraisals is they become the news, because they're the bad news. And the largest percentage of what we're seeing is appraisals that are coming in at or above value. So we're doing enough deals that these appraisals are coming in and everything's moving along. But it's the news is when they come in bad. So just know that it's not like a pandemic thing that's happening out there.
Yeah, unlike everything else. Right?
Yeah.
Well, one thing too, like I had one of my own properties a couple of years ago, sold the first day, full price. Appraiser came in from Phoenix and I didn't challenge it because I'm a moron. And it came in 35,000 under price. Of course, I chose not to lower my price because I knew it was priced appropriately. That one fell out because the buyer obviously didn't want to come up with the extra cash. Sold again within 2 days for a full price. Guess what? It appraised from that lender. So tell your seller, just because one appraiser may not know the area, it doesn't mean the next appraiser won't. And I did learn from that. If I ever get an out of area appraisal again, I'm going to challenge that with my lender or the lender. But we kind of got off escalation clauses into appraisals, which of course is fine. But does anybody want to have any more questions about escalation clauses, or do you want to continue on this or anything else? We've got about 10 more minutes.
Hey, Lisa, I had a quick question on the appraisal subject. So essentially, for what I've been hearing, pretty much always hire an appraiser who's familiar with the area, essentially, not like out of town, or is that like by case basis?
Well, it's out of our hands.
Right, we don't get to pick the appraiser, the lender does, but if the lender provides one that's from out of town, you can challenge that.
Oh, okay.
Nicely, please, but you can ask them to sell it, yeah, that is local.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Mhm. What else are you guys seeing? Any other problems or concerns or things you want to talk about in our last 10 minutes? Anyone?
Happy hour, when?
Well, one thing we've got some good stuff coming up. We've got the showing time that's going to be coming online in about a week, right?
No, actually, that went live on the 23rd.
Oh, that was yesterday. I was thinking
Yeah.
23rd a week. Oh my God. Okay, never mind.
So under your menu in the MLS, look under products and you'll find showing time.
Yeah.
And they have another webinar tomorrow, 10 to 10:30, that you can go to. And it has some great features in it. So if you have listings, you might want to check it out. And if you're a buyer's agent, you can actually set up a tour inside of showing time. It will set the tour up for the best route for you. And then it can send out the requests to all of the houses for the appointments. I mean, just makes it very automated. So it's worth checking out and seeing how you can work it in your business.
Exactly. The one thing is, as a listing agent, it defaults to opting into that system. So if you do not want to use showing time, at the top of your listing, you need to select that you are not going to use it. Otherwise, everything will be on there.
I've already used it.
Oh, great. What was that experience like?
It was good. I used something different in a different market, so this is a new format to get used to. But it was good. I think I ran into troubles because I booked my appointment, but there was somebody that was there that rolled up at the same time I did, and they were late on their appointment, but I already had my appointment set. I was like, well, I booked it on showing time. And so they waited and they went after me because they were a good 15, 20 minutes late for their time. And I don't think that they booked it on showing time, but anyway, it was good. It was very easy. I mean, it wasn't a multiple, it was just a one showing. So I'm looking forward to doing the multiple showings where it does the route and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. And just be cautious too. I know that all of you do this, but make sure that you secure the key box after you show the property. Don't hand the key off to the next agent. Make sure that they always access the key box. And then you are welcome. I had somebody the other day say, can I lock the door when I'm in? Absolutely, you can lock the door when you're in. And I encourage it. You don't have to let another agent in while you're showing the property. Again, secure that property and then let them access the key box. It's one of our biggest fines is failure to secure. Way to kill a room, gosh.
Hey, Lisa, I got a question for Wendy.
Uh-oh.
You said you've seen a lot of the escalation clauses coming in. Are any of those comparable to the wonderful information that is being provided by Lisa? Are there any elements of those clauses that we could utilize to perfect ours and even make it a better product?
Sure.
I did cut and paste one that I saw the other day because I am seeing escalation clauses where they're not talking net, and you have to talk the net. I'm seeing escalation clauses where it just says, hey, we'll go $1,000 over anything up to $225. That's not an escalation clause that protects your client in any way, shape, or form. The one Lisa has is excellent, and I'm watching for other ones that I think that are well written. But it has to have something about the net in there. It has to have that they prove to you that there was another offer that drove your offer. And so don't use just a 2-sentence, hey, we'll go higher than the next guy kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's my concern, especially now because the market is so hot that there's a tendency to leave some things out. That's why I'm saying once Lisa gets that out, and we're constantly mindful of improving that document so it's near perfect, I think that'll be very helpful for the agents that are going to contemplate using it.
And this is on dotloop, and this is one that Jody worked on, and then we just perfected a little while ago. So it's been out there for a while. I'm going to give Jody the credit that she's due on that one. But we'll publish it again and make sure that everybody gets a copy of it.
Well, if no one else is going to say anything, I've enjoyed myself, and I love the, there's what, about 25 participants or 20?
There's 20 now. There were about 25 before.
Yeah, there's about another 350 that could probably have used this same
Isn't
session.
that the truth?
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's the first one that I've attended, and I'm glad I did because it just goes to show the standards that we are maintaining as a company. And this, where the 20 of us can be missionaries to get other people invited to these sessions, because you're always going to pick up a good idea.
Yeah. And I pick up ideas as well, don't you, JT? Anytime anybody brings something up that, because I have not been that active in the market for like the last 10 years or so. I do onesie twosie kind of business. You guys are the forefront. You guys are out in the field, and I learn a lot from you all. So we always appreciate your input and what you bring back to us. Sometimes it's terrifying, but it's always interesting.
And I pretty much fall in that same kind of class because my wife, who is the agent, she's the one that introduces me as her agent in training. So you can tell where I've been reduced after 48 years of the business.
And those of you that don't know JT, I should have introduced him. I'm so sorry about that. JT has been a DB. He's been in the business for 40 plus years. He has been an AAR director. He's been a TAR director. He served on, I don't even know how many committees. He's a resource that is invaluable. And I've learned so much from him over the years. He's just a wonderful gentleman.
Well, thank you for that. But I have to stay abreast of things because so much is changing radically each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing an excellent job, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for holding these.
Yeah, I appreciate every one of
I
you.
haven't said anything. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something to learn in this crazy market that we're in. So
we can always learn. I think that's one of the best things anybody can do is to have an open mind and learn something every day. I learn something every single day. I don't know about the rest of you, but take a moment to just think about things and learn from it, especially in this crazy time.
yes. Is there going to be a July calendar coming out?
Yes. Don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know when. I know we just, we're adding a couple other broker classes on there. We're going to do a contract class and a Binzer class and a listing class. So we're going to try to step that up a little bit. When he's like, oh no, didn't know about it. No, surprise. But yeah, we need to step up our game for your benefit. We can't expect you to do a great job unless we do one for you.
Do we know if the second quarter continuing education class is scheduled, when it's going to be scheduled?
That is my call at 3 o'clock today. We are trying to decide what it should be. We skipped fair housing last time, but then we gave you all a credit to go to fair housing. So this time we were thinking about doing fair housing. Help me out here. What would be the best? I mean, we have a very small sample of people, but fair housing good for everybody, or?
Good for me.
Okay.
I guess what I understand about the CE is that through the two-year period, every one of our quarterly meetings with the CE attached to it, each one will be a different topic to get us through to all the different topics. So it's kind of a case of, doesn't matter which one it is, unless there's a pertinent thing about one that hasn't been done yet.
Right. And then there's also, 3 hours of, you're going to need almost 9 hours. I need a bunch of hours of general, but you guys need some general hours as well. So even if you duplicate fair housing, especially, is so pertinent all the time. Don't think that only one of those classes over 2 years is enough. Make sure that you take as many as you can. So I think fair housing is actually a very good topic for this time of life. Yeah. So that's what it'll be. All right. Well, we got 1 more minute. Anybody want to add anything? I appreciate every one of you. And one of the goals we have is to make this a better brokerage, make sure that we're the best that we can be. And that takes all of us to do that. JT's like, I'm good. I'm out.
I do have a suggestion.
Thank you all.
I have a suggestion, Lisa. I don't know if the team meetings are recorded, but if they are, if it's possible for someone even to take minutes or highlight some notes. I think a lot of times there's a lot of things said at the meetings and there's no follow through after that. So a lot of people just don't, if they're not on the call, don't know what's going on. So maybe just following up, what was important with the meeting would be a good idea.
Yeah, and I try to send, I guess one of our biggest challenges is that we try to post on Facebook, we try to do live meetings or Zoom meetings, we try to send out emails, and we have to expect people to either attend, read, or pay attention during that. So we're having a little bit of a challenge getting some of that information out. We certainly will keep trying. And those meetings are recorded, by the way. So you can pull those up on the 1KWS, I can't speak, 1KWSA site. All right. All right, well, it's a wrap. We're gonna call the into the meeting for today, and we'll see you all next Thursday.
Thank you.
I don't know what the topic will be. If
Thank
you
you.
have any ideas, throw them our way. Be happy to
Thanks.
talk about it. All right. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.
Bye.